The lowly cowboy reached out, and the giant Apache woman smiled in response. The cowboy lived a life that most people never noticed. Every morning before the sun rose, he was already awake, pulling on his worn boots and stepping outside into the cool air. The land around him was wide and quiet, with dry grass, open sky, and long fences stretching far into the distance. He had worked on this land since he was young, learning how to guide cattle, fix broken gates, and survive through hard seasons. His hands were rough, his clothes were old, and his voice was soft. Because of this, people often looked past him as if he were part of the land itself, useful but unimportant. He lived alone in a small wooden house near the edge of town. The house was simple, with a creaking door, a small kitchen, and one bedroom. There was no decoration on the walls, only a few tools hanging neatly and an old hat resting on a hook. At night, the wind sometimes passed through the cracks, making quiet sounds that reminded him how alone he was. Still, he never complained. He believed that life was not meant to be loud or grand for everyone. Some people were meant to work quietly and move on without leaving a mark. In town, people knew him only as the cowboy who showed up when work was needed. He fixed broken fences, helped move cattle, and cleaned up after events. When others talked loudly in the saloon or laughed together in groups, he stayed in the corner or left early. No one was unkind to him, but no one was especially kind either. He was invisible in the way that quiet people often are. When he spoke, people listened politely but soon forgot his words. Despite this, the cowboy carried a strong sense of respect. He respected the land, the animals, and the people around him. He believed that every person had value, even if the world failed to see it. This belief came from years of watching how quickly people judged others by their looks, money, or confidence. He had learned to stay humble, not because he thought himself small, but because humility made life simpler. One afternoon, the town prepared for a community gathering near the open fields that bordered tribal land. These gatherings were meant to bring people together, farmers, workers, and nearby communities, to share food, stories, and help one another. The cowboy volunteered to help as he always did. He helped set up tables, carried supplies, and made sure everything was ready. He did not expect thanks. Helping felt natural to him, like breathing. As the sun began to lower, people from different backgrounds arrived. Some wore clean clothes and smiled easily. Others looked cautious, unsure of how welcome they were. The cowboy noticed this but said nothing. He had learned that watching carefully told him more than words ever could. He moved quietly among the crowd, offering help where needed, keeping the event running smoothly. It was during this time that he first noticed her. She stood out without trying to. She was taller than most people around her, with a strong posture and calm eyes that seemed to take in everything. Her presence was steady, not loud or demanding, but impossible to ignore. She moved with confidence, greeting people with respect and warmth. Some stepped back slightly when they noticed her height and strength, unsure how to approach her. Others watched with curiosity. The cowboy did not stare. He noticed her the way one notices a change in the wind or the shift of the sky before a storm. Something about her felt grounded and real. She carried herself with pride, but there was kindness in the way she spoke to others. He learned from quiet conversation that she was Apache, visiting as part of the gathering to represent her community and help strengthen ties between neighbors. As the evening continued, small problems arose as they always did at such events. A table leg broke. A supply box tipped over. The cowboy moved quickly to fix what he could, working without drawing attention. At one point, he noticed that the woman was struggling to carry a heavy container alone. People nearby hesitated, unsure whether to help or how she might react. Without thinking, the cowboy stepped forward. He did not rush or speak loudly. He simply reached out, offering assistance with a respectful nod. There was no fear in his movement, no hesitation. To him, helping someone was not a question, it was a responsibility. She looked at him, surprised at first, then thoughtful. Many people either avoided her or treated her like a challenge. This quiet man did neither. He saw a task that needed doing and offered help without judgment. After a brief moment, she accepted, and together they carried the container to its place. That simple action meant more than the cowboy realized. For him, it was just another small duty like fixing a fence or guiding cattle. But for her, it was different. She had spent much of her life being seen only for her size or strength, not for her character. This moment felt honest and human. They exchanged a few words, nothing long, nothing dramatic. Simple thanks, simple replies, yet something shifted inside both of them. The cowboy felt a warmth he had not felt in a long time. It was not excitement or pride, but recognition. For once, he felt seen, not as a worker or background figure, but as a person. As the night went on, the gathering filled with music, food, and quiet conversations. The cowboy returned to his tasks, but his thoughts wandered back to that brief exchange. He wondered why such a small moment had stayed with him. Perhaps it was because kindness had been returned instead of ignored. Perhaps it was because her smile had carried understanding rather than surprise. He did not approach her again that night. He believed that some things did not need to be forced. Still, as the event came to an end and people began to leave, he noticed her once more. She was laughing softly with others, relaxed and open. When their eyes met across the space, she offered him a gentle smile. It was not loud or dramatic, but it was real. That smile stayed with him long after the crowd disappeared and the land grew quiet again. Walking back to his small house under the wide night sky, the cowboy felt something different inside his chest. It was not hope exactly, but possibility. For the first time in years, he felt that his quiet life might hold more than endless routine. He did not know her story yet. He did not know where this moment might lead. All he knew was that a simple act, done without expectation, had opened a door he never knew existed. And as the stars stretched across the sky, the lowly cowboy realized that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest meaning. The woman had lived a life shaped by strength long before she arrived at the gathering. From a young age, she learned what it meant to stand firm in the world. She grew taller than most people around her, and her body grew strong from daily work and responsibility. In her community, strength was respected, but outside of it, people often did not know how to react to her. Some stared openly. Others stepped back, unsure of themselves. Over time, she learned to remain calm no matter how others behaved. She carried herself with dignity, knowing who she was even when others did not try to understand. She came from an Apache family that valued tradition, respect, and responsibility. Her elders taught her that strength was not just in the body, but in patience, kindness, and self-control. She listened carefully to stories passed down through generations. These stories reminded her that her people had survived difficult times by standing together and respecting the land and one another. She carried these lessons with her wherever she went. When she agreed to attend the community gathering near the open fields, she did so with a clear purpose. She wanted to help build understanding between communities that lived close but often remained distant. She believed that small moments of connection could slowly change old habits of fear and misunderstanding. Still, she knew from experience that not everyone would feel comfortable around her. She accepted this as part of life and chose not to let it harden her heart. At the gathering, she noticed the way people reacted before she even spoke. Some smiled politely but kept their distance. Others watched quietly, curious but unsure. She greeted everyone with the same calm respect, refusing to let anyone's hesitation change her behavior. She helped organize supplies, spoke with elders, and listened more than she talked. Listening, she believed, was one of the strongest skills a person could have. Then she noticed the cowboy. At first, he blended into the background, moving quietly from one task to another. But as time passed, she saw something different in him. While others talked loudly or tried to be noticed, he focused on work that needed to be done. He did not push himself forward or try to impress anyone. His movements were careful and thoughtful, and his eyes showed awareness rather than judgment. When he approached her to help with the heavy container, she felt a moment of surprise, not because she needed help, but because of how he offered it. There was no hesitation in his body language, no sign of fear or pride. He did not assume she could not handle the task, nor did he avoid her. He simply saw a situation and acted with respect. That moment stayed with her long after they set the container down. As the evening continued, she found herself noticing him more often. He never hovered nearby, never tried to draw her attention. Yet somehow, she sensed his presence, like a quiet, steady rhythm beneath the noise of the gathering. She watched how he treated others, with the same patience he had shown her. Children trusted him easily. Older people nodded at him with appreciation. He seemed comfortable being unseen, and that quiet confidence impressed her. She thought about her own life and how often people misunderstood her. Some saw only her size. Others saw only her heritage, shaped by stories they barely understood. Rarely did people take the time to see her as a whole person. The cowboy, without saying much at all, had done exactly that. Later that evening, as food was shared and people gathered in small circles, she found herself standing near him again. This time, she spoke first. She asked a simple question about the land and the work he did. His response was honest and straightforward. He did not exaggerate or try to sound important. He spoke about the land with care, explaining how it changed with the seasons and how important it was to respect its limits. Their conversation was slow and natural. There were pauses, but the pauses felt comfortable rather than awkward. She told him about her community and her reasons for attending the gathering. She spoke about the importance of understanding and how she hoped people could learn to work together more easily. He listened closely, not interrupting, not looking away. When she finished, he nodded, showing that her words mattered. As they talked, she noticed something else. He never commented on her height or strength. He never acted as if she were unusual. To him, she was simply a person with a story, just like anyone else. That realization touched her deeply. It reminded her of how rare true respect could be. When music began to play and laughter filled the air, they went their separate ways again. Yet the connection remained. She felt lighter than she had when she arrived. It was not because anything dramatic had happened, but because something genuine had begun. A small bridge had formed between two lives shaped by different experiences, yet guided by similar values. As the gathering came to an end, she prepared to leave with others from her community. She felt tired but content. Before she walked away, she glanced back and saw the cowboy cleaning up, folding chairs and stacking tables just as quietly as he had worked all evening. For a moment, she considered leaving without another word. Then she remembered the importance of acknowledging kindness. She walked over and thanked him again, this time more personally. She told him she appreciated his help and his respect. He looked surprised, as if he had not expected his actions to be remembered. He replied simply, saying he was glad he could help. There was no false modesty in his voice, only sincerity. She smiled then, a smile that came from a place of understanding and warmth. It was a smile that said more than words could. It said that she saw him too, not as a background figure, but as a person of quiet strength. As she left, she thought about how easily people could miss moments like these. How often did life offer small chances to connect, only for them to be ignored? That night reminded her why she believed in patience and openness. Change did not always come in loud speeches or big actions. Sometimes it came in the form of a quiet cowboy offering help without expectation. Walking away under the fading light, she felt certain of one thing. Their paths had crossed for a reason, even if that reason was not yet clear. She did not know when she would see him again or what the future might hold, but she knew that something meaningful had begun, not because of size, strength, or difference, but because of shared respect and simple human kindness. And as the land grew quiet once more, the Apache woman carried that moment with her, confident that even in a world full of misunderstanding, genuine connection was still possible. After the gathering ended, life slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but something had changed beneath the surface for both of them. The cowboy went back to his early mornings and long days of work, yet his thoughts no longer felt as heavy as before. While fixing fences or guiding cattle across the open land, his mind sometimes returned to that evening. He remembered her calm voice, her steady eyes, and the simple smile she gave him. These memories did not distract him from his work. Instead, they gave his days a quiet warmth. He did not expect to see her again soon. Their worlds were different and chance meetings were rare. Still, whenever he passed the edge of the land near the tribal area, he felt a small sense of awareness, as if the land itself had changed. He realized that the meeting had reminded him of something important, that even a quiet life could hold meaningful connections. The woman, too, returned to her daily responsibilities. She resumed her work within her community, helping elders, guiding younger ones, and taking part in decisions that affected everyone. Her days were full but not rushed. She carried herself with the same calm strength she always had. Yet now, in quiet moments, she found herself thinking about the cowboy, not because he had done anything grand, but because his simple respect had stayed with her. She noticed that after the gathering, she felt more open when speaking with people outside her community. She listened carefully, just as she always had, but now she also allowed herself to be seen more fully. The small connection she had experienced reminded her that understanding could begin anywhere, even in silence. A few weeks later, another shared task brought them together again. A fence along the border of the land needed repair after a strong wind. Workers from both sides were asked to help. The cowboy arrived early, carrying his tools as usual. When he saw her approaching with others, he felt a quiet surprise, followed by a sense of calm. He greeted her with the same respectful nod as before, not wanting to make the moment bigger than it was. She returned the greeting with a gentle smile. This time, there was no hesitation. They worked near each other, fixing broken posts and tightening wire. At first, they spoke only when necessary, exchanging short comments about the work. But slowly, as the hours passed, conversation came naturally. They talked about simple things: the weather, the land, the changes they had seen over the years. The cowboy spoke about how the land taught patience, how rushing always led to mistakes. She shared how her elders spoke of balance, of knowing when to act and when to wait. Their words were different, but the meaning behind them felt the same. As they worked side by side, both noticed how easy the silence felt. There was no pressure to impress or explain. Each respected the other's pace and space. Other workers noticed this quiet understanding and felt comfortable around it. The work moved smoothly, without tension or conflict. At one point, the cowboy struggled with a stubborn post that refused to settle properly. Before he could ask for help, she stepped forward and steadied it with practiced strength. He adjusted his grip, and together they set it firmly in place. They shared a brief look of understanding and both smiled. It was another small moment, but it carried trust. Over time, these shared tasks became more frequent. They did not meet every day, but when they did, the connection grew stronger. They learned small details about each other. He learned about her love for stories passed down through generations, and how she believed stories shaped the future as much as the past. She learned about his childhood on the land, about lessons learned through hard work and quiet observation. Neither rushed the bond they were forming. They allowed it to grow naturally, like the land they both respected. They understood that trust took time, and both were willing to give it. However, not everyone viewed their connection with ease. Some people noticed their growing familiarity and whispered quietly among themselves. A few questioned why they spent so much time working together. Old habits of thinking surfaced, shaped by fear and misunderstanding. The cowboy noticed these looks but chose not to react. He had lived his whole life being overlooked, and he knew that attention, whether good or bad, passed quickly. The woman noticed the tension as well. She had faced such reactions before and knew how easily doubt could spread. Instead of responding with anger, she chose calm honesty. When asked about the cowboy, she spoke simply, saying he was a good worker and a respectful person. She refused to let others define the connection for her. One afternoon, after finishing their work, they sat for a short rest near the fence line. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the land. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she shared something personal. She spoke about how tiring it could be to always stand strong, to always be seen as unshakable. Her voice remained steady, but her words carried truth. The cowboy listened closely. He did not interrupt or offer advice. When she finished, he spoke quietly about how being unseen could also be heavy. He explained how people often assumed silence meant emptiness. Sharing this felt unfamiliar to him, but also relieving. That moment deepened their understanding of each other. They realized that strength and quietness were not opposites. Both required courage. Both carried weight. As the days passed, their presence in each other's lives became a source of balance. They did not depend on one another, but they appreciated the understanding they shared. They showed through their actions that respect did not need to be loud, and connection did not need to follow rules set by others. The land itself seemed to respond to this harmony. Work progressed smoothly. Small conflicts among others eased when they were around. People began to notice not the differences between them, but the calm they brought. By the end of the season, both understood that their bond had grown beyond a single moment or task. It was built on many small gestures, quiet conversations, and shared respect. Neither knew exactly where this path would lead, but both felt steady walking it. As the sun set on another long day, the cowboy and the Apache woman stood side by side, looking out over the land they both cared for. There were no grand promises, no dramatic words. Just a shared understanding that sometimes the strongest connections are built slowly, through patience, trust, and simple human kindness. As time moved forward, the quiet understanding between them was tested in ways neither had expected. Life did not stop simply because two people had found balance with one another. The land still demanded work, communities still carried old thoughts, and people still noticed what felt different from the familiar. The cowboy and the Apache woman both felt the shift, even before words were spoken. The cowboy began to sense change in the town. Conversations paused when he entered certain places. Some people watched him longer than before, as if trying to understand something they could not easily explain. He was no longer just the quiet worker in the background. His steady presence beside the Apache woman had made him visible in a way that felt unfamiliar. He did not enjoy attention, but he did not fear it either. Still, he felt the weight of it. At work, a few men made small comments, nothing openly harsh, but enough to show doubt. They asked questions that sounded simple on the surface but carried deeper meaning. Why did he spend so much time near the borderland? Why did he work so closely with her? The cowboy answered calmly, saying only that work needed to be done and people needed help. He did not defend himself strongly because he did not believe respect required argument. Inside, though, he felt the strain. For most of his life, being overlooked had been easier than being questioned. Silence had been his shelter. Now he had to learn how to stand in quiet strength rather than quiet distance. Some nights, as he sat alone in his small house, he wondered if his simple life was becoming more complicated than he knew how to manage. The Apache woman faced her own challenges. Within her community, some people expressed concern. They worried about how close she was becoming to someone outside their world. Their questions were not unkind, but they were careful and protective. History had taught them to be cautious. She understood this deeply and listened with patience. She explained that the cowboy had shown nothing but respect. She spoke about his actions rather than his words, about how he treated the land, the elders, and the work they shared. She reminded them that trust was built through behavior, not background. Some listened and nodded. Others needed more time. Even with this pressure, she did not pull away. She believed that turning back out of fear would only strengthen old walls. At the same time, she respected her people enough to move slowly and thoughtfully. She balanced loyalty with honesty, knowing both mattered. When the two met again after several days apart, the change was clear. Their greetings were the same, calm and respectful, but there was a deeper awareness between them. They both knew they were carrying more than just their own thoughts now. As they worked together repairing a water line, the silence felt heavier than before. Eventually, she spoke. She asked him if things had become difficult for him in town. The question was gentle, without blame. He paused before answering, choosing his words carefully. He told her the truth, but not with complaint. He said some people were unsure, that change often made people uncomfortable. He added that he could handle it, but he wanted her to know. She listened closely, her expression thoughtful. Then she shared what she was facing as well. She spoke about the concerns of her community and the careful balance she was trying to keep. There was no sadness in her voice, only honesty. For a moment they simply stood there, the sound of the wind filling the space between them. That moment could have pushed them apart. Instead, it brought them closer. They realized that neither was alone in this. Both were standing between worlds, not to challenge them, but to connect them. That understanding gave them strength. They agreed that whatever happened, they would continue to act with respect and patience. They would not hide, but they would not force anything either. As weeks passed, opportunities tested this promise. During a larger meeting meant to discuss shared land concerns, tension rose. Voices became louder. Old frustrations surfaced. People spoke about boundaries, about who belonged where. The air felt tight with emotion. The cowboy sat quietly, listening. He noticed how quickly fear could turn into sharp words. When asked for his opinion, he stood slowly and spoke simply. He talked about the land, about how it did not recognize lines drawn on maps. He spoke about how cooperation had made work easier and conflict smaller. His words were calm, without blame. The room grew quiet. Then the Apache woman spoke. She added her voice, steady and clear. She spoke about respect, about how strength was shown through understanding rather than control. She reminded everyone that working together did not mean losing identity. It meant protecting the future. Their words did not solve everything that day, but they changed the tone. People listened more carefully. Some nodded, others asked thoughtful questions. The meeting ended without anger, and that alone felt like progress. Afterward, a few people approached them separately. Some thanked them quietly. Others admitted they had never considered things that way before. Change was slow, but it was moving. Still, doubt did not disappear overnight. There were moments when the cowboy felt tired of carrying questions that were never asked directly. There were moments when the woman felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. During these times, they found strength in quiet moments together, walking along the fence line, sharing simple meals, or sitting in silence as the sun set. One evening, after a particularly long day, they sat near a small fire. The sky was wide and clear, filled with stars. The cowboy stared into the flames and spoke about his fears. He admitted that he worried about disappointing people, about being seen as trouble rather than help. Speaking these thoughts felt strange but freeing. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she told him that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward with respect despite it. She shared that she, too, felt the weight of expectation, but believed that walking the right path mattered more than walking the easy one. Those words stayed with him. Slowly, their steadiness began to affect others. People noticed that problems were solved more smoothly when they worked together. Younger members from both communities watched how they interacted and copied their calm approach. Small changes appeared: shared meals, joint workdays, open conversations that once felt impossible. The cowboy no longer felt invisible, but he also no longer felt exposed. He found a new balance within himself. He learned that being seen did not mean being loud. It meant being honest and steady. The Apache woman felt her strength deepen, not the kind that came from standing alone, but the kind that grew through connection. She saw that leadership did not always require distance. Sometimes it required openness. By the end of that season, the challenges they faced had shaped them rather than broken them. They stood stronger, not because the world had become easier, but because they had learned how to stand together without losing themselves. As they looked out over the land one evening, watching the light fade, they understood something important. True strength was not about size, position, or power. It was about choosing respect when it was difficult, patience when it was tested, and kindness when it would have been easier to turn away. And in that choice, they found not only each other, but a path forward that others could follow as well. The final season arrived quietly, without warning or announcement, just like many important moments in life. The land began to change again, colors shifting slowly, air growing cooler, days becoming shorter. The cowboy noticed these signs as he always had, but this time they felt different. He no longer felt like a man simply passing through days. He felt rooted, connected, not just to the land but to the people around him. The Apache woman felt it too. Change had followed her most of her life, but this change felt steady instead of uncertain. The bond she shared with the cowboy had grown into something strong and calm. It was not loud or dramatic. It did not demand attention. It existed naturally, shaped by shared work, quiet trust, and deep respect. By now, many people had accepted what once made them uneasy. Familiarity had replaced suspicion in small but meaningful ways. People greeted each other more easily at shared work sites. Conversations lasted longer. Laughter came more freely. These changes did not erase differences, but they softened the space between them. The cowboy noticed that people now greeted him by name. They asked for his thoughts during planning meetings. Children followed him around, asking questions about the land and animals. He answered patiently, never pretending to know more than he did. He remained the same man at heart, quiet, steady, respectful, but he no longer felt small. At home, his once empty house began to feel warmer. Sometimes the Apache woman visited, bringing simple food or stories to share. They sat at the small table, talking softly or simply enjoying the quiet. There was no need to fill every moment with words. Silence between them felt comfortable, safe. She, too, felt change within herself. She no longer felt she had to carry strength alone. She allowed herself moments of rest, moments of laughter, moments of uncertainty. She trusted that being strong did not mean being distant. It meant being honest and open when it mattered. One day, a large community gathering was planned again, much bigger than the one that had first brought them together. This time, it was not just about work or necessity. It was about celebration, of shared effort, shared land, and shared future. People from many backgrounds prepared together. Tasks were divided easily. Cooperation came naturally. The cowboy and the Apache woman worked side by side just as they always had. But this time, others worked with them too, without hesitation. The air felt lighter. Music filled the space. Food was prepared and shared freely. Children ran between groups, unaware of old lines that once divided people. As the gathering continued, elders from both communities spoke. They spoke of the past, not to reopen wounds, but to honor lessons learned. They spoke of the present, acknowledging the work that had brought people together. And they spoke of the future, reminding everyone that it would require continued patience and respect. When it was time for the cowboy to speak, he hesitated at first. Speaking in front of so many people still felt unfamiliar, but he remembered the journey that had brought him here. He stood and spoke simply, just as he always had. He talked about the land and how it taught him humility. He talked about listening and how silence could be powerful. He thanked those who had chosen cooperation over conflict. When the Apache woman spoke, her voice was steady and clear. She spoke about strength and how it could exist in gentleness. She spoke about bridges built through small actions, not force. She looked around and smiled, seeing faces that once held doubt now filled with understanding. When the gathering ended, people lingered. No one rushed away. Conversations continued under the open sky. The cowboy and the Apache woman walked a short distance away, standing together as they looked out over the land. The same land that had witnessed their first quiet meeting now reflected the change they had helped create. They did not speak for a long moment. Words felt unnecessary. The wind moved softly through the grass, carrying with it the sounds of people working and laughing together. Finally, the cowboy spoke. He said that for most of his life, he believed being unnoticed meant being safe. He admitted that he never imagined his quiet ways could matter to anyone else. He thanked her for seeing him, not as someone small, but as someone whole. She listened, her expression warm. When he finished, she told him that she had always carried strength, but had rarely been allowed to rest within it. She thanked him for meeting her without fear, for treating her as a person rather than a symbol. She said that respect had given her space to be fully herself. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft colors, they made no promises spoken aloud. They did not need to. Their commitment was already clear in their actions, in their shared choices, in the path they had walked together. Life did not become perfect after that day. Challenges still appeared, disagreements still happened, but now there was a foundation strong enough to hold them. People knew how to listen. They knew how to pause before reacting. They knew that understanding was possible. The cowboy continued his work, guiding cattle, repairing fences, caring for the land. But he no longer walked alone in spirit. He belonged, not because he had changed who he was, but because others had finally seen him. The Apache woman continued her work as well, guiding her community, protecting tradition, encouraging balance. But she no longer felt the need to stand apart to stay strong. Connection had become part of her strength. Together, they became quiet examples of what was possible. Not heroes, not leaders seeking attention, but people who chose respect every day. Younger generations watched them and learned without being taught directly. They learned that kindness could be firm, that humility could be powerful, and that differences did not need to divide. Years later, people would remember the story, not as something dramatic, but as something true. They would speak of a lowly cowboy who reached out with simple respect, and an Apache woman who responded with a smile that carried understanding. They would remember how that small moment grew into something larger than either of them expected. And as the land continued to change with the seasons, their story remained woven into it, not written in stone or spoken loudly, but carried quietly in the way people treated one another. Because in the end, the greatest changes do not begin with force or fear. They begin with one small gesture, one open heart, and one smile that says, "I see you."